Thank you, Mr. President. I'm back now for the 91st consecutive week that the Senate has been in session to urge my colleagues to wake up and pay attention to the threat of climate change. I am delighted and proud to be joined today by my colleague and friend, Senator Baldwin from Wisconsin, to consider the effects of carbon pollution in her state. According to scientists at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, weather stations around the state show that average temperatures in Wisconsin increased by about 1.1 degrees Fahrenheit between 1950 and 2006. During the same period, Wisconsin got wetter. Annual average precipitation increased by almost 3 inches. These changes are likely to continue and intensify as carbon pollution continues to pile up in the atmosphere. Researchers at University of Wisconsin-Madison estimate that by mid-century, the state could warm by 4 to 9 degrees Fahrenheit. By the end of the century, the climate in Wisconsin may look more like that of present-day Missouri or Oklahoma, raising the possibility of dramatic shifts in the Wisconsin economy and way of life. This winter has been pretty cold in the eastern U.S. and in Wisconsin. So was last year. Cold Arctic air dipping down over North America drops the mercury. As we continue into a time of what has been called global weirding, scientists say that climate change may make these cold blasts more common as it alters patterns in the atmosphere. In a nutshell, on top of the long-term warming trend lies weather disorder. But the long-term warming trend is apparent. New research from UW-Madison professor Jonathan Martin shows that last year the so-called cold pool of frigid air that accumulates in the northern hemisphere each winter was the smallest since records began in the winter of 1948 to 1949. This year it's on track to be even smaller. Sadly, some of our colleagues just can't face up to the role that human activities, like our carbon pollution from burning fossil fuel, play in the changes that we are seeing around us. One colleague, indeed the senior senator from Wisconsin, is among this group. In January, he voted against amendments to the Keystone XL bill, stating that climate change is real and that humans contribute to it. Well, in 2013, the Milwaukee Sentinel-Journal, his state's largest paper, noted this type of denial was at odds with both Wisconsin opinion and Wisconsin scientific evidence. The senior senator from Wisconsin wrote the paper's editorial board, quote, "is just flat out wrong," end quote. They went on to say, and I'll quote again, "We elect politicians to make tough decisions and find solutions, not to shut their eyes and cover their ears, as Johnson repeatedly has done on this issue." It continued, "Stubbornly denying the facts on climate change may be akin to denying the facts on evolution or whether the earth is flat," end quote. Professor John Kutzbach of the University of Wisconsin, an elected member of the National Academy of Sciences, was among a group of climate scientists who in 2011 wrote to us in Congress imploring us to take action on climate change. Here's what the letter said. "Congress needs to understand that scientists have concluded, based on a systematic review of all of the evidence, that climate change caused by human activities raises serious risks to our national and economic security and our health both here and around the world. It's time for Congress to move on to the policy debate," they said. Well, I welcome that debate. Indeed, Energy Committee Chairman Murkowski recently said on the floor of the Senate that she hopes we can, and I'll quote her here, "get beyond the discussion as to whether or not climate change is real and talk about what do we do." So where is that debate? Where are the other Republicans? Let's finally talk about the costs of action and the costs of inaction. The Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change Impacts was formed in 2007 by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and the University of Wisconsin Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies. The scientists and public officials in this program are doing important work to help the state of Wisconsin understand and prepare for climate change. They're studying how it will affect wildlife, water resources, public health, and important Wisconsin industries like forestry, agriculture, and shipping and tourism on the Great Lakes. Climate change threatens iconic aspects of the Wisconsin environment and economy. The Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change Impacts Agriculture Working Group reports that higher summer temperatures and increasing drought will create significant stress on livestock, even touching, dare I say it, Wisconsin's famed cheese industry. Victor Cabrera, an assistant professor in the University of Wisconsin-Madison Dairy Science Department, they have one, says heat stress interferes with fertility and milk production. Dairy cows could give as much as 10% less milk. The U.S. Department of Agriculture predicts that by 2030, climate change will cost the U.S. dairy sector between $79 and $199 million a year in lost production. When opponents say reducing carbon pollution will cost too much, they conveniently leave out the costs of doing nothing, like these costs. Well, Mr. President, the dairy state is not waiting for Congress to take action. The University of Wisconsin is leading a USDA-funded effort to identify dairying practices that minimize the emission of greenhouse gases and make dairies more resilient to the effects of a changing climate. Some Wisconsin dairy farmers are burning excess methane in enormous manure digesters, a frightening concept, to generate their own renewable electricity. Wisconsin sportsmen know that Wisconsin has more than 10,000 miles of trout streams, some of the best trout fishing in the country. And cold water fish like the brook trout are there, but they're highly sensitive to temperature increases in streams. Under the worst cases analyzed by the researchers at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, I'll quote, brook trout are projected to be completely lost from Wisconsin streams, end quote. Even the best case scenarios see losses of as much as 44% of the brookie's current range by mid-century. And other cold water species like the brown trout are not much better off. Trout Unlimited, sportsmen and conservationists working to protect trout streams in the driftless area in southwest Wisconsin and parts of Minnesota, Illinois, and Iowa, did a 2009 study showing that fishing in the driftless area adds over $1 billion, with a B, billion dollars per year to the surrounding economies. We've heard of loggers having trouble getting to the timber because the ground is thawed and too soggy to hold up logging equipment. For Wisconsin's loggers, the hard frozen winter ground is what lets them move logging equipment. According to a study out of the University of Wisconsin, that period of frozen ground has decreased by 2 to 3 weeks since 1948, shortening the working window for loggers before their gear bogs down. And then there's the badger. The Upper Midwest and Great Lakes Landscape Conservation Cooperative even lists the great Wisconsin badger as one of the species at risk from climate change. Mr. President, Senator Baldwin knows that done right, action on climate change saves Americans money, spurs American innovation, and creates new American industry and jobs. Focus on Energy, Wisconsin's statewide energy efficiency program, has been helping Wisconsin families and businesses save money and reduce energy use since 2001. The Wisconsin Public Service Commission expects that this program will inject over $900 million into the state's economy and net over 6,000 new Wisconsin jobs over the next decade. I am very grateful to my friend Senator Baldwin for her strong leadership on behalf of the people of Wisconsin to stave off the worst effects of climate change in her home state, and I yield to her now.
Well, thank you, Senator Whitehouse, for your commitment to addressing the threats of climate change globally in our country, and for highlighting some of those threats in my home state of Wisconsin. Mr. President, let there be no doubt that global climate change is real. It is a fact. The question is not whether it's happening, but rather how we are going to address it. Are we going to do all that we can to leave the next generation a safer and healthier world? As my friend from Rhode Island just noted, climate change will be costly to our economy and to our very way of life. And the longer we wait to act, the more costly these impacts will be. Throughout our history, the state of Wisconsin has been a proud home to environmental leaders who have worked to pass on a stronger environment to future generations. Aldo Leopold, John Muir, and Senator Gaylord Nelson, the founder of Earth Day and the namesake for the Nelson Institute at the University of Wisconsin that my colleague from Rhode Island just mentioned in his remarks. And as a representative of our great state, it is one of my top priorities to follow in this legacy and to preserve our natural resources and quality of life for future generations. It's not hard to see why Wisconsinites have always deeply valued environmental protection. Looking out at the crystal clear waters of Lake Superior from its south shores, or standing atop Rib Mountain, gazing at the forests and farmlands of central Wisconsin, to casting your fishing rod in the world-class trout streams of the Driftless region in southwestern Wisconsin, there is no question that we are blessed by the natural beauty of our state. But, Mr. President, even now, the impact of climate change can be seen on each of these landscapes and in the economies that they support. We see it in our agriculture. Growing seasons are shifting, and extreme weather harms our crops. And we have increasing concerns about drought and our groundwater. In fact, NASA recently warned that within a few decades, within our lifetimes, the United States may enter a mega drought that could last 30 years. 30 years. In my home state, the resulting decreased soil moisture will put additional stress on farmers, on private wells, and on our municipal drinking water systems. These prolonged droughts, combined with the increased intensity of storm events and changing temperature patterns, will force farmers to make changes to how and what they grow. This is extremely troubling, as agriculture is an $88 billion industry in my home state of Wisconsin. We also see the negative effects of climate change on our Great Lakes. In Lake Michigan, for example, the levels of the lake are largely driven by precipitation. Changes in precipitation patterns due to climate change may cause more dramatic fluctuations or prolonged changes in lake levels. In addition, data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration show that summertime surface water temperatures have increased 8 degrees Fahrenheit since 1980. Warmer surface water temperatures disrupt the food chain, which threatens our fish population. And as these adverse effects are expected to worsen in the coming decades, they will inevitably lead to more wildlife disease and warmer waters that will drive out native fish. Changing water levels also create new challenges for property owners and communities that are along the Great Lakes. Infrastructure may need to be redesigned. Insurance demands may change. And the new health risks, there are new health risks that may emerge or be exacerbated by additional stress imposed on our sewer systems. Each of these will hurt our local economies. Mr. President, tourism is also a major part of Wisconsin's economy. And the North Woods is a favorite destination to fish, camp, hunt, and snowmobile. But projections show that by mid-century, the climate of areas like Bayfield and Vilas County in the North Woods will be more similar to what we've known in the southeastern part of the state of Wisconsin in counties like Waukesha County. Meanwhile, Waukesha County's climate could be more similar to what we used to expect hundreds of miles south in the neighboring state of Illinois. The impacts on tourism, recreation, and the landscape we hold dear may be dramatic, and the threats may be daunting, but we cannot continue to let the challenges overwhelm us and cause inaction on our part. Wisconsin's state motto is forward. The people of Wisconsin have never been afraid of the challenges we face or what the future holds. We have a strong progressive tradition of confronting our challenges and working together to shape our future for the next generation. In fact, analysis by the World Resources Institute in 2013 found that Wisconsin is well positioned to meet national goals for carbon pollution reduction. And by extending existing clean energy policies, Wisconsin could reduce its emissions substantially in coming years. In addition, many of Wisconsin's most successful companies are leaders in energy efficiency, renewable energy, and clean technology. They are vital sources of innovation and will provide opportunities for the workers of today and tomorrow. Mr. President, I believe smart investments by government, by companies and institutions, and by citizens will help us confront the challenge of climate change while positioning Wisconsin for 21st century economic and ecological resiliency. This opportunity is great, and we must meet the challenge head on, going forward the Wisconsin way. I'd like to once again thank Senator Whitehouse for his laser focus on the issue that is so critical to all of our home states, as well as, frankly, the entire global community. I thank you, and I yield the floor. And I would suggest that I yield the floor back to Senator.
Let me just thank Senator Baldwin for sharing this time with me this evening and for all the wonderful work that she does on behalf of her home state. So with that, we yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.